Welcome GDLers to another edition of Scripting Adventure. This is Bruce from Barking Dog BIM, and in this edition we're going to be concentrating on our selection drop-down list. I'll show you a couple of different ways that you can format that to make your library part more intuitive and present a lot better. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's script some GDL. So I'd like to change this infield to look a little nicer. Doesn't look too nice at the moment, I don't think. So let's work on a couple of variations of that. So here's our infield here, desktop type. I'll copy that down one. Comment out the original just so it's still there until I'm finished scripting what I want to script. And if we look at our help, we've got a number of infield variations, 2, 3, and 4. And we've got a number of things that we can achieve with them. And what I'm after is this variation here for now. Something that's white background with a drop-down arrow that gives you your options list, pop-up list with text. So that's what I'm after, and we can see that that is type number 8. So in our infield here, we've got, at the moment in our script, we have name, X, Y, width, and height. And that's where we stop. Everything else is by default. What we want to do now is introduce a method. That's when it starts to get a little bit confusing. So let's see if I can break this down. So we've got our infield, desktop type, X, Y, height, etc. Now we want to add our method, which is method number 8. The next is the picture name. We don't have a picture, so I'll just leave that blank. Next is the images number. Now we have 3 selections, square, rounded, and chamfered. So 3 options here. Then we have our rows number. And that'll just be one row. I don't know why it's just 1 row, but that's what works. Cell X, cell Y, image X, image Y. And for these, we just put in zeros. Now, we've got our expressions, what we're actually going to see. In the first expression, it'll be desktop square. So in our master, that's number 1. And I'll do it in the most basic form and then I'll do it properly. Number 1, and that will be what? Square. Then we've got number 2, and that will be rounded. And then we've got number 3, and that will be chamfered. Let's check our script. It's okay. Go to our interface, preview it, and there we go. Our infield has changed. And it looks a little nicer now, and it is still behaving properly. Still getting the results we want. However, that's not very robust scripting. We've got duplicate definitions here. I've repeated the 1, whereas it's already defined in the master. And I've repeated my text definitions here, where we've already defined them here. So we can swap those out. Check our script. So what we've done now is we've swapped out hard-coded values for constants and array values that we've defined elsewhere. So we'll have a look. Interface, preview. It's still working. And if I change any of these values, so let's call it squared. Preview. It's updated here. So, and it all still works. So that way our script is all nicely tied together. One last change here is the number of items in our list. I can say vardim1 and my index. And for those of you who don't know what vardim1 is, under expressions and functions, expressions, vardim1 and vardim2 will give us the dimensions of an array. So in this case, vardim1 will tell me how many lines I've got in D-type index, which is 3. So that way if I change my number in here, if I increase my array or decrease my array, this will still work. but I've had to enter a new line for every different line of my array, for every different line that I want listed. That's not very efficient scripting. There is a better way to do it, and we use type 3 of the infield. That doesn't require a string input, so we can get rid of these quotes. We still need the var_dim, but what we do down here is instead of listing out every single line item, get rid of that, all we need to do is put in the arrays. And you have your description array first, another description array, and then your index array. Like that. Let's check our script. It's okay. Look at our interface. And there it is. It's working how we want it. So that's one variation of that infield that I wanted you to see. Well, let's save it and have a look in the object proper. There it is. Rounded, square. So good. Excellent. So I'm happy with that. Let's get rid of this. Might get rid of these as well, they're not coming back. So there you go, it's a nice tidy infield. The next one I want to do is I want to have a drop-down picture list. And that's type number 2. So let's just have a look at our bed example. That's this sort of list here. Drop-down list, and you can have text beside it if you want, but you've got a pictorial representation of what it is you're choosing. In order to achieve that, we need to create our images for that. Once again, through whatever means is easiest for you. I find taking screenshots is the easiest, quickest way. That style looks all right. I'll just change the surface so that it's just a plain white, and we'll take some screenshots. So now that I have those screenshots available, I want to shrink them down to the size that I want. Once again, let's figure out what that might be. So that's probably a little bit big, but it'll give us an indication. So something around about maybe that size. So what's that, 100? 100 pixels looks good. So I'll just sort that out. So we've got our 3 different selection images with a transparent background. So that's step 1. Step 2 now is we got to stitch these options into a single image. That's how it works. So if we have a look at something I created for a different object for a selection of vases, this is the single image that's used in the infield. And this is how it looks in the selection list. So we need to choose a cell size. Now our little icon here is 100 by 100. Let's add a margin around it of say 10 pixels. So we'll make our cell size 120 by 120. So file, new, we've got 3 of these, so it will be 360. And its height will be 120. And we will fill with a transparent background. And I like to create a white background because sometimes it's hard to see the final result if it's a transparent background. We'll configure our guides to be 120 by 120 and we'll turn on our grids. So if we look here, we've got our 3 cells for our final images. So let's copy them in. So if I turn off the background white, that's the selection that's going to look like. They're the images. And that's what I'll save the image as. Again, save it as a PNG or a TIFF. So back in the file, you need to reload your libraries because you've just added some images to your library. So just reload. So now that this PNG file is loaded into our library, we can use it in our infield. So what we want is we don't want to type 8. We want to type 2 or a method 2, pop-up menu control. So that's type 2. We want the name of our image here. We want the number of images, which is 3. We want the number of rows, which is 1. Remember, we had them all in a single line. Cell X and cell Y, we will just keep them at 0. That works. And then our image X and our image Y will be 120 by 120. That's the size of our image. Now, I don't know why, but because we're now using an image, even though we're using the same infield variation, it no longer works as a description at the front. We now need to have an index as the first item here. Index, text, index. We'll also need to change the size of our infield. So if we have a look at the preview here, we've got our selection here, but it's can't see what's going on up here when you choose it. So we need to change the size of that. And we'll just make that 300 by 120. So there's our infield, a bit wide. There it is. Now you can see that I've made it far too big. It could be probably at least half that size. So let's make these image sizes about 40. I'll fix that up. See you on the other side. So I've resized the image, reloaded my library, changed my relevant dimensions. Let's have a look. Square, rounded, chamfered. So the selection list is working. That should probably be a bit wider. That's better. Right, let's just tidy it up a bit because we've got things overlapping. I don't like the way it appears anymore. So we'll shift this inbox over a bit and up a bit, and we'll shift this image down. Now this is where it comes in handy that we've associated these infields with the position of our main image. So they'll all shift when we shift our picture. There we go. I'm reasonably happy with how that turned out. I think this is probably a bit big, but I'm demonstrating how to actually achieve this. And as I've said before, I wouldn't create an interface for an object this simple. But that looks good. We've got our square, it's working, rounded, pops this up with our little dimensional arrow there. Chamfered, keeps the same field. We've got our tooltips working. And we'll just add a tooltip to this one. Desktop corner type. Rounded, square. Excellent. We'll save that. Have a look in our object itself in the Archicad environment. And there's our interface. With a menu system, icons in the menu, a nice interface. I mean, I'd probably make these icons a bit darker, a bit clearer. And a picture there that changes when we change our selection. And it's all linked to our object. It's all working. Great. So what I'd like to deal with now is getting our page declarations from each of the individual subroutines up into a more easily managed location in our script. So what we do is we go sub. And in here, this is where we make the declaration for all of our pages, and it makes it a lot easier to manage. So we'll have a constant, PG for page, root, which will be our -1, and we'll have a page ID equals 1, which is our incrementing counter for our pages. So now we declare our arrays that we're going to store these values in. So dim page description and page image, and we'll go page description of our first one, which is page ID, equals, what do we call it, settings. And we'll go page settings equals page ID, and page image page ID equals, and we say page ID equals page ID plus 1. Now we can update our page declaration down here in the Go sub and replace it with what we've done up here. So the first page won't be a 1, it will be page settings. This will be page root. Our name will be page description, page settings, and our image will be page image, page settings. Now we just need to create our next one. And copy that down to here and change Alright, so now when we preview, it's still working, but what we've done is we've tightened our script to make it easier to edit and add and change pages as we need. Just get rid of this that we did before, no longer need it. It's all gone. So that is that. To demonstrate what I mean by inserting new pages into your object, what I'll do is I'll create a copy of this line and I'll change this as required. So let's just pretend this is our new page. I'll call it insert, just so we know what's happening. Insert. I'll just put in a placeholder image, and then I'll put in a subpage to this one. So just adding another line, I'll call it insert sub. I'll keep the image the same. Let's just tidy this up a bit. If you keep your colons in a column like this, it makes your script a lot easier to read. I want to have this menu item after settings, and I want to have this sub menu below this insert menu item. So now we come up here and we add our Go subs. The order of these Go subs doesn't necessarily matter. It's good to maintain them in the order in which they happen, just for ease of reference later on. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'll put them here, just so we don't get lost. Now I can make my page declarations. So I'll copy this line. I want this to be one of the root menus, so its parent menu will be root. There we go, that's that one. And of course, if I was doing this properly, this would be a fleshed out Go subroutine with all of the infields and outfields. But I'm just showing you how to add new pages. Now with my insert sub, same thing, except this is insert sub, and my parent menu is page insert. So now let's have a look at that. What I've got now is I've got my insert menu here, inserted after the settings menu item, and it's got its own sub-menu item. So that's working. I mean, of course, there's nothing in there, but the menu structure is there. Now, if I want those to appear in a different position within my menu, all I do is I take these and I shift them to where I want them to appear. So let's say I want them at the end now. So I shift them to the end, and there we go, they're down at the end. And the reason for that has all got to do with this ID. Because it's incrementing after each item I put into my array, each of these has an incrementing page ID. Now there's been a question about how to load your images into the project library, so I'll just cover that briefly. Under File, Libraries and Objects, Library Manager, or this button here on your toolbar, you see I've got a number of libraries loaded into my project, one of which is this BDB library, which is just a folder off my hard drive. Now if I show you that library, you'll see I've got my GSM object there. I've also got the PNG images. And that's as simple as it gets. You just put them into the same folder. You may want to have a different file structure, similar to the way that Archicad puts all of their icons into their own folder. You may want to use a different file structure, but that's as simple as it gets. Just make sure your images are loaded in with your libraries. And finally, I'd just like to reiterate that there's online help available in the forums, and you can get to them by the Help, Online Resources, Graphisoft Community selection. That will take you to community.graphisoft.com, and up in the top right here we've got Developer Hub and GDL. So if you click on that, that will take you to the forum where you can ask all your GDL related questions. Make sure that your question is properly formed and it has a good subject line. Your answer will only be as good as the question you ask. So I'll wrap this one up there, and that completes our beginners series on GDL. If you've been following from the start, well done. You certainly know a lot more now than you did when you began. You'll be able to go to parties now and impress people with your dank GDL skills. Well, maybe not, but you'll certainly be able to create some parts to help make your Archicad life a lot easier. And that's what this is all about. Gaining efficiencies and making the tool work for you. So thanks for following along, and I'll see you in the next one.